Hello and welcome to the Wisden Cricket Weekly podcast. As I'm sure you're aware, we're working with our partners Kia UK this summer. You may know that Kia have been embedded in the world of cricket for almost 15 years. They've actively supported the rise of women's cricket since 2014 and have been the proud sponsors of Surrey County Cricket for the last 10 years. During each episode of the podcast, Kia will provide you with an opportunity to get closer to the action through their Kia's Movement That Inspires moment. These include tickets and experiences to key cricket competitions across the summer. Listen out each week to hear how you could get involved and win an opportunity of a lifetime. 4 down, 1 to go. The 2023 Ashes summer comes to an end this week at the Kia Oval. We'll talk a little bit about that before going through all the other news from the World Game over the last week or so. I'm Yas Rana, and with me today is Jo Harman and Ben Gardner. But first up, Phil Walker caught up with Ollie Robinson between the two tests to hear what the mood has been like in the England camp after that rain-affected draw in Manchester.
Where's the collective head of this team at now, having had a couple of days to process it all and 24 hours out from the next one?
Yeah, obviously Manchester was a great shame, really. We felt like we played all the cricket again in that game, and for the weather to ruin the last 2 days was unfortunate for us and unfortunate for the series. We're obviously in pole position going into Saturday, Sunday, and we were pretty confident that we would have got the win and got the job done. So we feel really for the series and for cricket, it's a shame it got ruined. I think this Test match, if it was 2-2, it would have almost been a perfect series. We played some amazing cricket. There's been some amazing games, and I think to top it off here at the Oval when it was 2-2 would have been great for us in the game.
Yeah, we'll come to that in a minute. Can you remember a weekend like it in your professional career, a more frustrating weekend than that?
No, I mean, there's been days when I wish for rain as well, and those two definitely weren't it. But, it just was non-stop, wasn't it? I mean, I've had rain where it's sort of washed out a half day or sometimes one day, but to wash out most of 2 days is just unbelievable, really. I think we were sitting there Sunday thinking, surely we're going to get a gap, surely we're going to get a little break. And it just didn't come, unfortunately. I suppose that's cricket, isn't it? We play in the summer, but in England we can get rain. So yeah, it's just a shame. The lads were a bit flat that evening. Understandably, obviously, we felt like we'd had a pretty good series. We felt like we'd made most of the Test matches the games that they were, and to not be able to sort of have a chance at winning back the urn due to rain was a great shame.
Stokes gave a speech after the game, right, in the dressing room. Can you convey the essence of that for us?
Yeah, just about obviously this Ashes series isn't going to define us as players, and we're about the big picture. We're about the legacy that we're trying to create as a team, and the imprint that we're trying to leave on cricket. And for us, we want youngsters coming to watch and youngsters watching at home to want to grow up to be us and play cricket the way we played it. And that's not going to stop after the Ashes just because we've lost. We've still got to continue that and try and build this legacy that we're trying to create. They were sort of the words that he said, and that sort of gave everyone a bit more energy and picked everyone up a little bit, really, because it just shows that the bigger picture on the whole thing, and that this little moment in our summer, in our career, isn't going to define who we are or what we become.
You didn't get the result, obviously, that you were after at Old Trafford. It still felt like for those 3 and a bit days, that was probably the best version of the philosophy, the McCullum-Stokes philosophy, and that, you know, for all that it didn't go your way result-wise, there must be a sense of achievement at least, or satisfaction at least in the dressing room that you nailed the brief, right? That all the talk congealed into that 3 days.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the way that we're always going to try and play. And for it to come off for 3 days in Manchester was really pleasing. I think the bowlers bowled unbelievably well. The batters smacked it everywhere. I mean, Zach Crawley's innings was one of the best I've seen, I think, against a really good Aussie attack. So we're going in the right direction and making strides every game, I think. And that game sort of epitomised where we're at and what we're trying to do. Like I said, it was almost a perfect game for us, really, apart from obviously the last 2 days.
On Crawley, then, you've seen him at close quarters. You probably also tried to bowl to him as well, no doubt. And he's come in for more debate and more grief, and I know you're not really on social media as such, and I know that he's not either, but you will know that there's a lot of noise around Zach Crawley. Give me a glimpse into what kind of character he is like in the dressing room and how he's gone about dealing with all of that noise around him, all leading to, as you say, one of the great innings you've seen in recent years.
Zach's very sort of laid back character. I don't think too much outside noise does affect him. He comes in the same every day. He'll train hard. He'll put the yards in, and that we see every day how good he is. So we know that it's in there, and I think that gives us confidence as a group and the trust in Zach that we know he will produce. And obviously he did last week. He's also got a bit of a jokey comedy side to him, which people probably don't expect. But he's got some good wit and some good humour. But he's just a really relaxed guy, and when he bats, you get that feeling that that's sort of in him. He doesn't ever look too frantic. He doesn't ever look like he's bothered by the occasion or the moment. And I think last week he deserved it more than anyone, really. He's played some really good knocks this series so far, only for sort of 30-40. And Marcus Scothick actually said he's round the corner from a big score. And obviously last week he got it. So yeah, very pleased for him, and what a knock it was.
From a bowler's perspective, what makes him so dangerous?
I think he's obviously a big guy, and he's imposing at the crease, and you don't really feel like you can pitch it up to him. You feel like you pitch it up, you get whacked. You bowl short, you get whacked. So I think as a bowler, your margin for error is a lot smaller than maybe when you're bowling at someone else. We always say up here, he's probably one of the best players of fast bowling that we've got. He just has so much time to play. I think the Aussies rarely even bump him anymore because he just whacks it in front of square for four, and it's like, don't go there, sort of thing. And then you pitch it up to him. If you go too full, he drives you down the ground, and he just hits the ball so hard. And as a bowler, you know at the top of your mark when you're bowling against someone. If you miss, you're going to go for four, and he's one of those guys that you really feel like you can't miss. So he's hard to bowl to in that sense. And even for a big guy, his running between the wickets, his singles, rotational strike, he's almost got every element of the game. And I think that's what obviously the coaches and the team see in training a lot. And when we play warm-up games and stuff, you see that in him. And that's why Baz and Stokes have kept him around so long. And I think we're going to reap the rewards of that. Obviously, we did last week, and I think there's a lot more to come.
Do you get the sense, are you aware that the Aussies, certainly say the press and the supporters, certain sections of the supporters at least, are kind of really enjoying the English trying to get their heads around the fact that, the Ashes is going to be retained, and there's nothing that they can do about that? Do you get that sense, right, that the English, that we're trying to sort of squirm our way through it and understand how we've got to this point? And that they're kind of quite enjoying this. Do you get that feeling? Because I do.
Yeah, a little bit. I think obviously that they retain the Ashes, and it's disappointing for us and for the fans. But I think, like Stokes just said to us in the change room, for us it's about that bigger picture, that legacy. And if we dwell on this for too long, then it's just going to eat us up. Really, I think there's no point in panicking about the situation. Almost, it's been and gone. It's done now. I think for us, we're looking at this week. We're looking at India in the winter and how we can carry on this form of cricket that we're playing and this aggressive style of play. A few of the lads have seen sort of numbers and viewers numbers over the Test matches, and they've been the highest ever. And for us as players, that's really rewarding to see, no matter sort of what the result, because you know that people around the country, around the world are watching, tuning in and really enjoying what we're doing. And like you say, we're obviously trying to squirm out of it a little bit because we can't retain the Ashes. We have lost the end again, but for us as people and a team, we have to look to the future and just try and control what we can control now.
All right, well, let's look to the next few days then. What's at stake here at the Oval? Describe it, because it felt like it was building to this grand finale, and now it's kind of a finale but kind of not. And so where are you with it emotionally, psychologically?
I think for myself and the team, it's just about winning this game and putting on a show. I think if we can end the summer dominating the Aussies at the Oval, putting on a show, playing that brand of cricket that we want to play, putting bums on seats. That's where we want to be and how we want to play. And I think for us as a team, that's what we're going to try and do this week. We obviously played really good cricket last week, and if we can continue that, we won't be far away again. So hopefully the weather can stay away as well, and we can draw the series 2-2. To draw the series now is sort of what we're going to have to look at. It doesn't mean much, but at least we feel like we're going in the right direction, and we're playing that style of cricket that we enjoy and play.
The game will kick in, and then people will be taken with the game itself. It always happens with Test cricket, but come the end, if it is 2-2, it's going to be a slightly odd thing, isn't it? One side not sure whether to celebrate, the other side not sure whether to celebrate. And so you end up sort of shaking hands and then looking to 2.5 years down the line, right? And I wonder if your mind has already wandered to the rematch in Australia.
Yeah, I mean, just on that, I think regardless of the result this week, this England squad will celebrate hard after the Oval because of the way we've played this summer, the cricket that we played. That's how we want to play, and we'll celebrate that. So yeah, I think that'll definitely be a big celebration from us, regardless. But on the future, I've thought about Australia already. One of my mates actually texted me a couple of days ago, said, "When's the Ashes down under?" And it's just good because we've already got that excitement about it, and I think for the nation that's a great place to be. I'm already looking forward to that. Looking forward to the rematch, and obviously when we went down last time, it wasn't the greatest series. So really looking forward to going back there and trying to right a few wrongs, as it were.
All of this is done in 6 weeks. This whole series.
I know.
How's the team bearing up psychologically as well as physically? And is there a sense that a show as great and as grand as this deserved more time?
I think on the team, the lads are good. I think psychologically, the environment that Ben and Baz have created allows us just to be free and sort of relax between games a bit better than maybe we have done in the past. The lads seem really good. Everyone's in good spirits. We travelled down Monday from Manchester and played golf in the afternoon, and it's just a great place, an environment to be in, to be able to sort of come away from a test match not winning, knowing you should have won, and then the next day playing golf with your mates at a course, enjoying each other's company, and just having that camaraderie is just so good for us psychologically and mentally. And I think obviously a 5-match series, the bodies are obviously going to be sore, but we know that it's one more big push now to get through this game, and then there's a bit of time off for the Red Bull lads.
It's just odd though, isn't it? You know, someone like yourself, as your Red Bull specialist, you get to August and, you know, there's going to be no Red Bull games for you to play, and you'll kind of hang around for a month, kick your heels, maybe play the odd 100 game, but then wait for Sussex again in September. And it feels like this is the heart of the summer, and you as a Red Bull specialist, you're not going to have much to do.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like you said, it's done in 6 weeks, and maybe it could be extended a bit longer. But as a cricket fan and a player, there's nothing more you want than to see cricket on TV every week and to see great test matches on them. And we know that as players as well. So although it is over quickly, you do feel like if you have too big a break, you're just waiting and waiting for that next game. And I think it's good for the nation, good for us as cricket and fans to have that sort of constant game each week, and that theatre around it. I think, would this be the earliest it's finished before?
Yeah,
as well, I think.
Never been done before August, ever.
No, so like you say, maybe it's a little bit quick, but for us, it's felt absolutely fine, and it's just felt like a normal series, really. With obviously 3 or 4 days and a few games, we had one break, I think, one longer break. Yeah, it's not been too bad. But for myself personally, I'm going to go away in August for a week, probably just sort of chill for a week, and then I'll come back, get back in the gym, get back training, and carry on as normal. Just try and better myself each day, regardless of sort of playing cricket or not, and get myself into the best sort of condition I can do for whatever I'm called upon.
So on your own story then, Ollie, but how do you look back on it, how it's gone for you, coming in with that slight niggle, which meant that you were maybe, as you said yourself, a bit undercooked at Edgbaston? How do you look at where your own story is at?
Yeah, I think the foot injury before the series was really bad timing. I think I was in great rhythm before that, and for Sussex, and I just feel like without that, I would have sort of hit the first test flying. So that's obviously a shame, but I suppose you can't do anything about niggles and injuries. I think for me, again, it's another learner on sort of flatter pitches with different balls, and just knowing that there's still work to be done. There's still things I can improve on. There's still ways I can get better, skill-wise, body-wise. So it's just, for me, another learner. I think it's my third year now with England, and still trying to learn as much as possible and get better for every series that comes upon me. So it's been a great series to be a part of. It's so much fun. Obviously, we've still got the Oval to go, and yeah, like I said, just need to take the learnings from this and go again in India.
Relations between the two teams overall? How are you getting on, you two? You love-hate affairs?
I don't know, actually. We've not really seen them. There's obviously been a bit of back and forth in the press and all that, but we've not really seen them. I'm sure at the end of the Oval, we'll have a beer with them in the dressing room. I've got some good friends in their team, and I'm sure they do in our team as well. So I think we obviously fight hard on the pitch, and there's been some talk off the pitch, but at the end of the day, we're just 22 blokes playing against each other, trying to have fun and put on a show. And I think it'd be a shame if we didn't sort of celebrate that together after the series, regardless of what happens.
For this episode's Kia's Movement That Inspires moment, Kia is giving you the chance to win a pair of tickets to Oval Invincibles versus Welsh Fire in the 100 on August the 6th at the Kia Oval. For a chance to win, all you need to do is enter by the link in the description. Myself, Joe and Ben at the Kia Oval, a day out of the 5th Test match. If you can hear some music in the background, that's England going through their final preparations before the 5th Test. We spent a few minutes watching Ben Stokes bowl some more than serviceable off breaks before we started.
More than serviceable.
Keep
some
an eye
sharp
out
turn there.
Exactly. Keep an eye out on that for the tour to India at the start of next year. Joe, welcome back. We're in a slightly weird but familiar position. Australia 2-1 up going into the 5th Test. How do you think this Test match will be as an event? Butch was actually pretty upbeat about this on Monday's pod.
Yeah, thank God. After listening to you guys, I did listen to you guys on Monday, and it wasn't really the pick-me-up I needed after that miserable weekend. And having dealt with Phil for the last couple of days, I can promise you his mood has not improved as well. Yeah, I don't know if I'm trying to kid myself here, because I'll be here as a journalist. I'm also coming in as a punter on Saturday. Spent a fair wedge to come for that. Really excited about it. So maybe there is a bit of kidology with myself, but I am excited for it, and I think it does matter. It definitely matters a lot for Australia, as you guys said. You know, they ballsed it up last time. They're desperate to actually win a series here, and also all the talk of legacies that England's kind of talk about inspiring the next generation, and they say results aren't that important. It's a style of play, but you don't create a legacy by losing 3-1 at home into Australia. A 2-1 draw where you can come out saying, "Oh, we are hard done by here and here." That gives you a bit more weight behind that point you're trying to make. So I think it does matter for both sides. I absolutely do. Yeah. And the more I say it, the more I'm convincing myself. And also, you know, an Oval Test match, England v Australia, two really good sides. There is a lot to be excited about. Clearly, a bit of the sheen has already been rubbed off by what happened at Old Trafford, but I'm excited, and I hope listeners are as well, because, you know, at the start of the series, we probably wouldn't have wanted England to be 2-1 down, but we'd have probably taken this scenario. It was the dream scenario, 2-2 going into the 5th, but this isn't too bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if you're like the disappointment is because if England had won at Old Trafford, then this test, you're going into it as the most anticipated test match in like 15 years, if not more, right? Between two of the three best sides in the world, the two best sides in the world in these conditions. Obviously, all the interesting stuff we talked about with the contrasting styles of play. And we don't quite have that, but yeah, that doesn't mean there isn't still some stuff riding on it, and that there isn't still, you know, this won't be very interesting from a cricketing point of view as well, I guess. Yeah,
and also we had our moan on Monday, and a few people have had a moan about the fact that we had a moan on Monday.
Have they? Do people not appreciate
a few people, particularly non-English listeners. Some
Right.
Australians seem to really enjoy the podcast, and I think I would have enjoyed it if I was in their position. But some people moaned about our moaning, which is completely fair enough. Don't hold that against you. But if Australia win, you know, the whole narrative of the Rain Save Australia goes out the window. This series gets remembered as the crowning moment of this Australian side, most of whom have been together for the best part of a decade. So that there's so much to play for. England normally announce their 11 around about now, so we won't get into team speculation too much. But the big question, presuming that the bowlers are all okay fitness-wise, is does Anderson and Broad to a lesser extent retain their spots in the side? Ben, on pitches that aren't necessarily what we normally get in England, Anderson's been pretty quiet, not been hugely incisive this series. He turns 41 during the Test match. Whether or not he plays, do you expect this to be the end of Anderson as a Test cricketer?
Well, I mean, he did a pretty punchy column for The Telegraph, basically saying that he's having absolutely no thoughts of retirement. And I kind of had an inkling that would be the way he'd go, because this is just what we've been in this spot so many times, right? And the difference is slightly that Anderson has not had the returns he's used to, but he fairly enough pointed out that also the luck has not been with him, that he did bowl actually quite well at Old Trafford, beat the bat often enough. You know, there was the moment at the end of day one when there was an inside edge that goes right past the stumps and he has that look on his face. And that look on his face you can interpret as how much more can he be bothered to put up with this stuff. But also it was fair.
I've seen that look for 20 years though.
Exactly, yeah. And he said, you know, he's having more fun than he's ever had in an England side at the moment. And kind of why would he like call it in when that's the case? Like if Ben Stokes and Brendan McCullum make that decision for him or take him aside for a quiet chat, that would be different. And that would be the thing that would prompt a decision. But actually, when you're coming to India, you've got a guy who has been very successful in those conditions, who actually, the way he's bowled here would almost be better in India. Like if he's going for 2 and over and taking the odd wicket, that's actually that can be a very useful job over there if you're on flat pitches. And also they're going to need all the kind of quicks and all the support and all the experience they can get there. So actually, if he wants it, I don't see why Stokes and McCullum would make that decision for him. And I think he does want it because he likes winning Test matches, which fair enough seems like it is a pretty incredible feeling when you do it. So.
Yeah, I think Ben's right. I think it's if he wants it, I definitely don't see England tapping him on the shoulder just yet. I don't think they've got anything like the fast bowling reserves to be in a position to do that. As Ben says, he's bowled beautifully in the subcontinent in the latter part of his career. He was very good in India last time round. And even in the context for this series, I mean, he's got the best economy rate. I know they're not very fashionable these days, talking about economy rates, but he's got the best economy rate of any bowler on either side. Ben Stokes said ahead of the toss at Old Trafford, or just after the toss, that even when Anderson's not taking wickets, he's still worth his place in the side because of the role he plays. You know, he's going to say that, but I also think there's a lot of truth in that. And I think we're going to come on to some of the bowlers who might play for England and Australia down the line. England aren't awash with options at this stage. So I think if he's still got the desire to do it, then I think he carries on. I do wonder, though, I was wondering, like, if he was going to retire this summer, would he tell us about it? Because I imagine he might find the kind of the pomp and ceremony of the whole thing, what would effectively be the James Anderson test, a little bit embarrassing, not really his style. So I wouldn't be surprised when the time does come, and I'm not saying it's yet, if he slips out a bit more quietly than a lot of England fans might like, because he doesn't want the fanfare around it all. But yeah, if he fancies India and plays, 3 tests out there, and then maybe finishes next summer with a couple of tests against West Indies and Sri Lanka, that might be a nice way to go.
What about Broad? He's 37, and very, very few seamers play Test cricket at that age. We almost forget that because of what Anderson's doing. And I kind of wondered before the series, will he want to leave on a relative high? I know that England aren't going to be able to win the series, but Broad, on a personal level, has actually had a really good series, probably Old Trafford aside. Or do you think he'll look at how he bowled in the first 3 tests and think, actually, I can play 10 Test matches a year and still retain a pretty good lifestyle? And, on the sly, haul down whatever Anderson's wicket-taking tally finishes at. England go to India next year. Even when Broad was younger, he didn't play a huge part on tours like that. And then next summer, there are 5 tests scheduled at the moment. There probably will be a 6th scheduled in as well. But with the fact that Broad doesn't play any white ball cricket, he doesn't play that much for Notts, he can still do that and have a pretty good lifestyle in a way that's very different to people who are 27.
Yeah, I mean, same rule applies, really. I don't see him calling it a day. I definitely don't see England saying, Stuart, you've done your time. I think that would be mad call. He's the leading wicket taker in the series, certainly for England. I think for the whole series, yeah. He's still got a lot to offer. I think with Broad, Anderson's done a bit of media stuff. He's obviously got his own podcast and will no doubt do more of that. Broad, I think, he's got a seat waiting for him at Sky, hasn't he? So I think that's more like, when does he decide to take that? Can he balance the two? He probably can. I think that will be more of the thing that maybe pushes Broad towards retirement, just when that seat feels ready, when he wants to take it up. But again, I don't anticipate him calling it a day until maybe the end of next summer. But I think he's shown his worth again this summer, hasn't he? All of us didn't have him in the starting lineup at the start of the series, and I didn't think he bowled that well at Old Trafford actually, but in the first 3 tests I thought he was brilliant.
Ben, a part of all this discussion, I guess, is that it's not really clear what England's attack will look like next time Australia are here in 2027, or even in Australia in 2.5 years' time for 25, 26. Ollie Robinson will still be around. Chris Woakes, I guess, is unlikely to be involved prominently, given his record in Australia. He'll be 36. Mark Wood, at a push again, he'll be 36 just after that tour, and not many 36-year-olds bowl 93 miles per hour. And we've learned not to build Ashes sides around Ollie Stone or Jofra Archer. I mean, genuinely, who is out there? Who are going to be the seamers that England look at for that tour and beyond?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the thing is, as much as you wouldn't expect all of those guys to be there, England might hope that if they keep those guys around, they might get one of them there, say out of, let's say, Wood and Woakes. And Wood is a weird one because, yes, he is getting on in age and he has had lots of injuries, but those two things can actually, in some cases, extend your career, because it means he hasn't actually played the amount of cricket that another person his age has done. So, there's a possibility. And, we've seen this summer, Josh Tongue has come through and has looked. I mean, he's not Wood pace, but he gets bounce. He challenges good batters on good surfaces. I also think that Matt Potts will continue to be in the conversation. He doesn't get into an England starting side now, but he only needs to add a little bit in like one of a few areas, and then he does become a player who is, a serious test proposition in a few conditions. So I think there are a few players there that they would hope, because, there was a point earlier this year, or was it earlier this year, or was it maybe the end of last year, when it looked like England might have, the entire battery, and they kind of come through that, the injury woes completely that, you're going to have. Also, Mahmood will be another one. So you've got Mahmood, Stone, Archer, Wood. I mean, Woakes wasn't even in the conversation at that point, but he's now played a big part. Broad.
Jamie Overton.
Exactly, yeah. So there were a lot of these guys who were like, okay, actually, there's a proper stable there. And now that's reduced, but that will build up again. And those will be the same kind of names in the mix, even if it's not the same ones who have played in this series, I think. So I think that, they should have a decent stable of bowlers when they go out there, even if they lose a few to injury along the way.
I was looking through we were talking about this, I was looking through the leading wicket takers in the county championship this year, and that does, again, highlight the issue that they have. So Div 1, top English wicket takers in Div 1, Brett Hutton at Notts, 30 years old, he's never going to play Test cricket. Chris Rushworth, 37. Jamie Porter, 30. Young enough, but England weren't interested when he was absolutely at his peak, so it seems unlikely they go to him now. Tom Bailey, 32 at Lanks. Another very good county medium pacer. Going to Div 2, Potts leads the way. As Ben says, he's going to be a big part of the conversation for a while. Then Ben Rain, 31. Chris Wright, 38. Joe Leach, 32. These are all medium fast, not going to play Test cricket. So they almost have to do what they've done. Josh Tongue would be a good example, but what they've done with, say, Zach Crawley as well, that you don't go on county numbers, you go on what a Test bowler looks like. And a few names to throw out in that who maybe fit that bill. Dylan Pennington, who's just gone from Worcestershire to Notts, who hasn't this week. Tall, strong, quick enough. Injury problems goes without saying, but looks like the real deal, and they've liked him for a while. Matt Fisher went to the Windies, taken quite a few wickets for Yorkshire this year after coming back from injury. And then Sam Cook, who's a bit different in that he probably doesn't fit the mould of what a Test bowler should look like, but his record is so good. He averages sub 20 in first class cricket, 25 years old. I think they have to take a look at him at some point. India, probably not the way to go. Again, if we're talking about bowlers who will profit for England in Australia, again, he's probably not the guy that you're looking at, but a little bit like Ollie Robinson a few years ago, who people said, yeah, he's not maybe quick enough for Test cricket. Cook's record is so good. and he's skillful enough that I think they have to take a look at some point.
I guess that's partly what I was asking in the Anderson and Broad question, is that the 2024 summer is probably a good time to bring someone in for the first time, and someone like Cook, I think England do rate. Like, there was that graphic on Sky last year where they had their list of seamers that they consider as part of the conversation, and Cook was on it. He was the only one who hadn't played a test match who was on it. And also he's been on a few Lions tours to different parts of the world and just always does okay in conditions that you'd expect not to suit a bowler of his sort. So I think he's someone we'll see come into it.
He was also one of the standout bowlers at the start of last season when they had the Duff batch of Duke balls. So I guess that showed as well that he could be a bowler who could take wickets when conditions weren't fully in his favour.
And I guess, as you say, that it is one of those things that if a bowler can bowl 85 to 90, they will come straight into a Lions tour. England won't waste any time in that regard.
Bryden Carter's another name we mentioned.
Yeah, definitely good one. On Australia, it looks like Todd Murphy will be back for the 5th test. There's a slight fitness doubt over Mitch Marsh, but if he's fit, it will probably be Cam Green that misses out. Ben, I find Green quite a frustrating player in that he's amassed huge runs in domestic cricket. He can bowl really quickly, and I actually think low-key bowled pretty well in Manchester. And even if his run-up suggests otherwise, he does actually fire it down at good pace. And we've seen in white ball cricket that he can pulverise attacks, and he's just been quite passive this series, and he's not really stamped his authority on the series when he definitely has the talent to. And he's been really highly regarded for quite a long time now, but we just haven't seen him go up to the next level that we probably would have assumed he'd have done by this point in his career.
Yeah, I guess so. But then it's not, it's not out of, the realms of things that have gone on in the past for a guy to have a bit of soul searching, a bit of figuring out what type of cricket he wants to be, considering how young he was when he was sort of pulled into the setup as well. But I guess it is interesting to figure out wonder what type of test batter especially he'll end up being, because just because someone can whack it in white ball cricket doesn't necessarily mean that's what they're best placed doing. Some of his best innings, even in first class cricket, have been sort of like back to the wall rearguard efforts. And I actually wonder if Australia could see him as more of a top order option at some point, if he becomes more of a Jacques Kallis rather than a Ben Stokes, as a guy who, especially because, with the bowlers they have, you need a guy who is taking some workload off, but you don't need sort of like they don't need a third seamer for that guy. Like, they have enough options for that. So I wonder if that's the route for him, and actually, if he's at number 6, that's where the indecision can come in, and you're like, why is this guy sort of grafting around for a 20 while bats are falling at the other end? But equally, if he's up at number 4 and they think this is a guy who has the temperament and the concentration, the technique to make big hundreds, then that might be where they look at him eventually. And they're going to need someone in a few years' time, at least, with Steve Smith getting on. So I wonder if that's the progression for him, rather than him becoming Ben Stokes or Andrew Flint of a number 6.
Yeah, I think passive is the word, and curiously so. It's odd because as England fans, I think we live in fear of what Cam Green would become. Like, we've talked about this before both of the last series, and actually he hasn't done much against England at all, really. I think he bowled beautifully in Australia against England, but over here they've largely used him as a kind of a bouncer merchant. I suppose a lot of bowlers have been bouncer merchants this summer, but which doesn't feel like you're getting the best out of him, even though it may be the most effective way to use him in those conditions and given the match situation that they found themselves in. But I think it's been shown up as well. He's been shown up to a degree because I don't know the stats on this, but it feels like Australia's 3rd wicket partnership has been good in this series, and that Heads generally brought impetus to the game, and then they lose a wicket, and then Green comes in and doesn't build on that, just looks very static. I don't know if that, as Ben says, maybe we're just misjudging him as a test player and what he wants to be, but it feels like he could and should dominate more than he does. And it'll be interesting, in a game like this where they have retained the Ashes, can he play with a bit more freedom and come out and play his shots?
And on Murphy, Ben, I said it in one of the dailies, I don't think that Cummins has handled him that well. He basically only bowled at Headingley when Stokes was on a rampage, and then he was ignored for the majority of the 4th innings, then left out at Manchester with Travis Head bowling the 23rd over of the England innings. And I don't think that will instill him with lots of confidence, when I think he needs every bit of confidence in him that he needs, given that he's going to come against an England lineup who everyone knows what they'll try to do to him.
Yeah, and also there was a lot of praise for Murphy around his test debut in India when he comes in and sort of out bowls Nathan Lyon, but equally he will still be like, if he were to struggle here, then the question's over. Is this a guy who is, a subcontinent specialist? And actually Nathan Lyon is a freak, and we don't appreciate that enough, because he is just because he seems quite normal. You know, he's just like he used to be a groundsman. He, like when you watch him bowl, it's not like there's anything extraordinary happening. But to be able to be that successful in lots of different places, that's just not a given. And if Todd Murphy were to struggle in these conditions, he will quickly need to answer those questions when he next does get a chance. And actually, when will that next be? Like probably unless Lyon gets another injury, which doesn't happen often considering he played 100 tests in a row before. He did miss out at Headingley. It might be a while until Murphy gets that chance again, and then who knows what Australia's spin stocks look like at that point. So it is quite an important test for him because of that. And yeah, the Cummins didn't handle him that well, and maybe he will have learnt from that and bring him on for an early over or two. But equally, it will just be down to how he bowls, I guess. And that was also just partly because of how the game went at Headingley. It just moved so quickly all the time that there was no sort of, England basically never built a long partnership, right? There wasn't a 50 stand in the game until the one that Wokes and Rokes and Brook put on together. So that would have been your opportunity. Like, okay, there's not much happening now. We'll get the spinner on for a bit of a spell. That just didn't happen. So there's a bit of mitigation there. And equally, that'll be the test for him in this game is when England do put on a stand. That'll be when it's introduced. And how can he sort of affect the game? Even if it's just slowing it down, it's not breaking the partnership open. That'll be the test for him.
It's one hell of an arse, though, for a 22-year-old finger spinner who's not actually played that much first-class cricket. I think he's really good from what I've seen. He bowls at a good pace, gets action on the ball, but it feels really hard to judge him on how he might go against this England lineup that look to obliterate every spinner they come across.
Yeah, and I think England's approach has got in Cummins' head on this one. I think he would have used Murphy very differently if England approached their cricket differently and weren't so aggressive against the spinners. But you know, that's also a reason to give him a go. There's actually, when he got Stokes out after taking some tap, most people said he'd done pretty well in that situation. Obviously, he got hit for a couple of sixes. It's not quite, you haven't got anything to lose, but you also, the expectation is you're going to go for a few. So if you end up taking three for and going at 6 and over, in these circumstances, that's actually probably quite a good result. And against England, there's every chance that will happen. You know, Brook might well bloom one in the air because he sees the spinner come on and his eyes light up. So I think, yeah, that's an example of, I think, the BazBall stuff getting in Cummins' head and causing him to behave differently as he otherwise would have done as a captain.
All of our Ashes moments of the week are brought to you by our stylish partners, Charles Tyrwhitt. The menswear brand are famous for their smart shirts and suits, down to their comfy polos and chinos. They've even got Joe Root support as their latest brand partner. Get 20% off at Charles Tyrwhitt by heading online to charlestyrwhitt.com and using the promo code Wisden23 at checkout. Our Charles Tyrwhitt Ashes moment of the week, it's not a moment per se, but it's some of the post Old Trafford chat on Cummins about whether or not he's the right man for the job, which I think is really unfair because it's basically one bad test match. And we know, Joe, how important this test is for Australia and how this side will be remembered. Do you think it's important for whether or not he keeps his job? Because there has been quite a lot of chat in Australia about him not being the right man for it, which, as I said, I think is quite surprising.
I have to be honest, I found the Australian and UK media back and forth a bit exhausting over the last week, so I've kind of kept my head down, so I haven't seen a lot of it. I have seen enough to know that Cummins seems to be under threat, according to a few of the kind of big beasts of Aussie cricket and the Aussie media. I find that bizarre. There's obviously been times in the series when he's not captained well. That happens in Ashes series when the pressure's on, particularly the way England are coming at Australia. He only won the World Test Championship a few weeks ago. So I'd be amazed if his position's under any threat. The thing that seems more likely is that he might just think, do I need this? I'm the best fast bowler in the world, or sort of used to be before I was captain. Do I need this extra responsibility? So I'm not saying he'll resign at the end of the series. I think that would be a shock. He's meant to be captaining at the World Cup in a couple of months' time. But I don't necessarily see his captaincy having that much longevity because I don't know if he thinks he needs it for that long.
I guess there aren't that many tours like this, but Ben, it is just quite difficult for a fast bowler to go through 3 sets of back-to-back test matches, and he's not young anymore. You made the point before the podcast, it's almost quite hard to work out how old he is because he started so young and then didn't play for so long. But he's 30 now, and you'd think that most fast bowlers would be managed across a burst of test matches like this, and Cummins hasn't. I wonder if he wasn't captain, would he have actually played all 6 test matches? Yeah,
and I think he probably wouldn't have done it. He might have done because he is the best bowler in that Australian side, but this does limit their opportunities to sort of rest and rotate, I guess. Yeah, I think when you look at Cummins in the whole, firstly, he's been in the job for almost 2 years now, which is a decent stint for a Test captain, and he's done a pretty good job that whole time, right? Like, they won the Ashes very convincingly in Australia, won 1-0 in Pakistan, drew in Sri Lanka, which is an okay result, breezed through a home summer, and then had a decent time in India, albeit the Test they won, he had flown home for, but that was partly because, I guess, he will still, take some pride in how Australia played in that game and towards the end of that tour. So it's not like he's done an awful job as such, and so I don't think
he's done a pretty good job.
Exactly. And I don't think I really don't think there will be any suggestion from within Cricket Australia or within the team management that he needs to be pushed out the door. But equally, it just depends it does depend a little bit how this Test goes, because it will just feel really bad for him if the same kind of thing happens as happened at Old Trafford, right? That England sort of get on top of him. They don't really have the answers, and of Australia, they don't really have the answers in the field. And then there's all that stuff going on outside. And that might just be, as Joe says, have I had enough time? I guess the other thing is about the successes as well. And
also, who the people who think he should go, who's the energy? Is it like bring Steve Smith back, or is it Travis Head should be, or someone else?
But Head has been a vice captain at points as well, so they've seen him as possibly a successor at some point. I think, yeah, Steve Smith, I guess, would be in the conversation, but considering they overlooked him last time and his form is worse now than it was at that point, maybe, and he's obviously, you wouldn't expect Steve Smith to be captain in 2 years' time, whereas you might have done before the last Ashes series. So Head, I think, would be, I don't think, well, the smart money would be on Cummins just sticking around, but Head, I guess, would be the one after that. The other thing as well is just the cricket that Australia actually play from now on, the Test cricket in particular, where this really was the end of a pretty intense cycle of meaningful games, and now I think they play something like 6 away Tests in the next 3 years. So if you're, on the one hand, Cummins can have it pretty easy if he wants to.
So again, 6 away Tests in 3 years.
I think that's right. Yeah, they play just 3 2-test series in that World Test Championship cycle and going into the next one as well. So if he wants to stick around and have a pretty easy time, but he can do. If you want to bed in a captain, or even just have kind of like a stopgap captain who ends up captaining for quite a long period of time, but not a long number of games, this would also be the chance to do it.
Yeah, I guess we were quite critical of Cummins at points during the Manchester Test, but I also think that captains aren't really allowed to have a bad Test match before people say they're not the right person for the job. They're not allowed to just have a bad week. So yeah, I find that quite odd. And also, I reckon if you compiled an 11 of players who high-profile pundits have called to be dropped or removed from their position during the series, you probably have 12 or 13 pretty good players who will be playing in the 5th Test. We mentioned it before in the podcast that there'll be no Northern Men's Ashes Tests in 2027. At the start of the 4th Test match, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, probably his first ever Wisden podcast shout out, and the Mayor of West Yorkshire, Tracy Brabin, have urged the ECB to reconsider that allocation. They wrote a joint letter to the ECB where they said that they understand the ECB's criteria for awarding Test matches includes maximising attendances and ensuring a geographical spread of matches. They then said it feels even more remarkable, therefore, that an area so passionate about cricket with a population of over 15 million misses out on a men's Ashes Test in 2027 when the South hosts 3. It doesn't feel right at a time when cricket needs to do more to spread interest in the game around the country that London consistently hosts 3 Tests every summer. Next year, for example, Lords hosts 1/3 of England men's Tests, whilst Headingley doesn't get any. Crucially, though, Lanks are actually fine with it. So their chair, Andy Anson, released a statement straight away saying, "We're entirely comfortable with the process that the club went through with the ECB regarding the major match allocation for future men's and women's cricket between 2025 to 2031. The announced package provides the club with 7 years of certainty for international match scheduling, which will see 40 days of international cricket played at the ground. The package is the result of in-depth discussions between the counties and the ECB, and it's been a thorough and fair process. As well as the men's Ashes Test in 2031, we will also be welcoming India for 4 matches in 5 years, in addition to hosting international women's cricket for the first time in many years, which we look forward to." I find it quite interesting because some people are rightly saying, but doesn't Headingley have the women's Ashes Test in 27? But I think you do have to separate the 2 series, because if you reverse that question, Like, I think there should be women's tests at Lords, for example. The number of men's tests Lords host shouldn't impact whether or not they get women's tests. Both series in their own right should be held at the best venues for those series. I think you do have to separate them. What do you think, Jo, of the Northern Ashes test, men's Ashes test in 2027?
Well, I think I said when I was on last time, I think it's just ridiculous. I think it's a disgraceful decision. I think the idea that you could now change that decision and strip someone who's already been told they're getting an Ashes test and said, no longer, Southampton, sorry, you haven't got one after all, that's not going to happen. Clearly, the decision has been made. I think the key is to make sure the same decision isn't made in future. If you're talking about spreading the game around the country, then, it directly flies in the face of that. Interesting that Lancashire came out and made that comment. A little bit surprising. Also, they can be fine with it. Doesn't mean all the fans are. So it's one thing for a club to say all the numbers add up. We think we'll be financially stable or financially profitable from what we've got over the next however many years. That doesn't mean the fans are going to be happy with it. Ashes tests mean a lot more to fans than other tests, or mean a lot more to a lot more fans anyway. So I think it's a real shame, and it's not going to be changed for 2027, but it shouldn't be allowed to happen again.
Chris asks, can we have every test series be in June and July so it has the main focus for the sporting public before football dominates again? There's been a lot of chat around the timing of this year's series, people comparing it to 2005, where I think if we're in the 2005 cycle, we've just had Lords, we've just had the first test, we haven't got to Edgbaston yet. But Ben, the entire Ashes series has happened in between Champions League final and the Community Shield until the start of the Women's World Cup, Football World Cup. I don't think there's really been big sporting events that have gone on for that long during the men's and women's Ashes, actually.
We had Wimbledon, didn't we?
We had Wimbledon. I guess you always have Wimbledon. And I think it doesn't have the same focus for casual like it doesn't take, it's not because it's every year, it doesn't take people away in the same way that the other events might do. So yeah, Ben, are you happy with June, July? Do you think that should be the norm? Is that something that just works for Ashes summers? Or what do you think?
Yeah, I think it sort of works. I guess what you're balancing is that window of free time you have in the calendar, and also this won't be the case every time. And you have the big football competitions or the big men's football competitions that sort of alternate years. So next year you'd be up against the Euros, which would be a pretty tough thing, and you're balancing that versus the summer holidays. But I guess what the ECB are backing on, and maybe this is a fair enough gamble actually, is that to get the kids in, you're going to be able to get them into cheaper games, cheaper than Test cricket, at least in the 100, versus the Test matches, which can maybe be more of a national conversation grabbing thing. So I think I'm broadly all right with it. And also the weather point as well.
Go for it.
It's obviously, given the week we've just had, that's it feels a bit silly making it, but it does in general rain more in August than it does in June and July. That is the peak of the British summer.
Is that what you feel, or have you looked at the numbers? Yeah.
I've looked, but I have sometimes suspected that it's like, oh, this is a rubbish August day. It's like, that feels like something I've thought more than this is a rubbish July day.
But you have looked at the numbers as well.
Yes, yeah, and that does tend to be what happens.
The question of the week is from Frogner Blender, who asks, England win in the 5th test, and then the ICC decide, for the good of the game, the Ashes must be decided by a super over. Jo, who bats and bowls for England?
Great question. Brilliant question. This was the first thing I thought about when I woke up this morning, which is quite sad. So I would go, I'd go Brooke and Stokes as my 2 batters, with Bairstow in the hutch waiting to come out as the 3rd. And bowler, I think I'd probably go with Wood. Woke's a close 2nd. Probably Wood. Certainly the way he's gone in this series.
Ben?
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. I guess you'd see who's informed from the game as well, wouldn't you? Like if Crawley's got another very big 100.
But as you've made the point a few times recently, Crawley's more of a 4-hitter rather than
but
a 6. But you imagine super over, you're going to have 9 blokes on the fence, right?
Yeah.
That suits your prime 6 hitters.
Yeah.
Which
but
I think I'd probably go Stokes and Bairstow. Like when Bairstow gets going, they kind of pick up 6s, and he's played even more white ball cricket than Brooke has.
But I think with Bairstow is he's often not great for his first 10 balls. Like
point.
he doesn't often
point.
come out and start smashing it.
Maybe
the same is true of Harry Brooke, actually, who doesn't necessarily.
Who are they up against? Who are Australia going for in this situation?
Mitchell Stark's going to be pretty difficult to deal with the ball, isn't he? Just firing in 6 Yorkers. And then with the bat, I guess it'd have to be Head. And if Mitch Marsh plays, him, I guess.
Yeah.
And then who's in the hutch? Warner, I suppose, not bad for scoring some quick runs.
Green's a good white ball hitter.
Yeah.
So,
Also, Warner's good at scampering, isn't he, between the wickets? So he might get you 6-2s in a super over.
I think England will win that though.
Yeah.
3-2 England. That's what I'm going for.
Joe, the county championship was going on during the 4th Test match, then it started straight away after the 4th Test match. It never ends. Your moment of the week is from a bonkers first day at Edgbaston where everything happened.
Yeah, I mean, the game might well be done by the time you're listening to this. if day one is anything to go by. Warwickshire skittled for 60 on day one, just 22.5 overs. Ethan Bamber taking 5 for. That was Warwickshire's lowest championship total for 41 years. Middlesex then slipped to 59 for 5 in reply, but rallied to 199 all out. And then Warwickshire batted again, 53 for 2 in their second innings at stumps on day one. Ben, I saw your tweet. Alex Davis faced 3 balls in the day, out twice and a 4, right? It was just 3 balls. There's a lot going on this game. I'll come to a brilliant bit of something for the Statos afterwards, but my favourite moment was Toby Rowland-Jones. He was playing a useful cameo for Middlesex. Hits a glorious 6 off Ed Barnard over long on, holds the pose, admires the shot, and then sort of steps backwards with the satisfaction of someone who knows they've absolutely creamed it, swings his bat in the process and knocks off the bails with his bat as it swings back. And the best bit is that he clearly realises what he's done immediately, just keeps his head down, hoping no one's going to notice. And then the Warwickshire keeper, Burgess, does say, hang on, mate, you've just knocked your own stumps down. And Rowland-Jones is on his way. This has obviously done the rounds on social media, slightly embarrassing for Toby. But Middlesex well set in that game at this point. And the Statos thing, so in Middlesex's innings, Warwickshire used 4 bowlers. Have you seen this, Yaz?
Nope.
You're going to love this.
Warwickshire used 4 bowlers. All 4 bowlers conceded 49 runs. 3 of those bowlers returned identical figures of 3 for 49.
Wow. I'm
He's
lost
almost
for words.
He's
I'm
almost
lost for
speechless.
Has Andrew Sampson been on the case? Is this
I don't know the response to this event.
I'm as
lost. This breaking news story.
I'm as lost for words and as shocked as I was after we saw it rain all day.
It's one of those things that's quite surprising. There's almost nothing to say in response. Yeah. So maybe we just move on.
After yesterday, it's increasingly looking like a 2.5 way fight for the title. There's a massive game going on between Essex and Hampshire, another low scoring one. So on day one, Essex bowled out Hampshire for 120 at the Aegeus, but Essex are 156 for 8 in response. If Essex win that, you think that Hampshire are pretty much out of the conversation. Warwickshire obviously had that nightmare first day at Middlesex. Obviously a chance they rebuild today, but if they don't win that, you think, again, they're probably out of it. Surrey are going decently against Somerset, but worth saying that they have actually struggled with the bat a little bit recently. Obviously, Ollie Pope was away with England, but then injured. And Rory Burns is really, really struggling. He's had, I think, 7 low scores out of 8. He got a 79 against Middlesex last week, but other than that, he's really, really struggling. They're top of the table at the moment, as I said, going well against Somerset at the moment. Elsewhere, a few people are up in arms that Kent have signed 2 young, highly rated batters on 1-game loans. Albert from Hampshire and Geddes from Surrey, both of whom aren't really playing red ball cricket for their counties at the moment. Ben, what do we think of this?
I think it's just a complicated situation, and also conveys the county championship sort of complicated position within the game, where it's neither sort of like it's like a completely rigid competition that's there for its own sake, but it's also not just obviously for the sakes of the England Test team. If it were just you would worry just about competitive integrity, then you would probably be looking to outlaw these 1-game bans. This is actually, in some ways, I think one of the more palatable ones, right? Like, this is just a side who are bringing in some players to fill in a few gaps that they have actually managed to incur, rather than some of the slightly more nefarious things you've seen at times when a club loans out their fourth best seamer to whoever their title rivals has to be playing that week, or when you get Conor McCurr and his tour of the 18 counties in a season.
When you say a few gaps in the Kent side as
Yeah,
well,
so
there's
sorry.
quite a few gaps.
It's basically a whole 11 they're missing, right?
There is a whole 11. So I asked someone at Kent what's going on there, and he very quickly fired back to me a missing Kent 11. So this is players who are either unavailable or injured. Most of these players are injured. So Crawley, Muyeye, Beldrummond, Denley, Cox, Billings, which is pretty much their first choice top six. O'Riordan, Stuart, Hogan, Nathan Gilchrist, and Wes Agar. All of those guys are unavailable at the moment. So I think when you consider that, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world that they're bringing in two very good batters who aren't getting a game for their county at the moment.
Yeah, I think there's an emergency loan, like they have emergency keepers in football. That feels like it should exist to protect the integrity of the competition. But yeah, I don't know what there are meant to be some rules in place, aren't there? Some sort of vague rules in place to stop counties just loaning players to another county to boost their own chances. It feels like they need to get stricter on that and for those to be more clear cut. But in this case, I think, yeah, absolutely take pity on poor Kent and let them have a few players. In
Division 2, the race for the second promotion spot is ridiculous. Sussex currently in second place with one win all season. There's barely anything between Sussex, Worcestershire, Leicestershire, Glamorgan and Yorkshire, who had a nightmare start to the season, but because no one is really winning, they're still very much in the hunt.
But might yet get a points deduction, which we're still waiting
yes. I mean, that obviously is the great unknown for Yorkshire this season. But if that doesn't come into play or isn't as severe as we might have thought, then they are still in the hunt. I guess the big county news in the last week has been that there have been quite a few departures from Worcestershire. Leicester have had a few departures as well, but that was announced a few weeks ago. So Jack Haynes became the third promising young Worcestershire player following Josh Tongue and Dylan Pennington, who Ben talked about earlier in the show, to join Notts from next summer. Pat Brown is going to Derbyshire. So for a small county to lose 4 homegrown products, all of whom are really highly rated, that is huge. Joe, does the English games do enough to stop this happening?
It's becoming increasingly problematic, and we're starting to get what you see in Premier League football of the big counties almost stockpiling resources, which is not good for the competition. It's not good for the future of 18 counties. It's actually not in the long run good for England either, because if you've got talented players who aren't getting a game, then that's not benefiting those players or the national sides. We were talking about this before we came on air of how it could look, and we're planning a big feature on the transfer system, or kind of lack of, in WCM, the issue after this one, because it does need looking at, I think. And contracts run down and players move on, and there's not a huge amount you can do about that. There is compensation in place. Ben, you get a 6,000 per year for every year that a player has been on your academy, and then you start to lose 6,000 per year for every year they're in your first team, because you're getting the value out of them.
Yeah, or the academy thing is up until the age of 22, which they judge as their basically like development years, and then 23 to 28 is like peak years, I guess. So for someone like Pat Brown, I think Worcestershire will get 36 grand, I think, which is it's a decent chunk for a club like Worcestershire.
I suppose that is. But the other thing, Worcestershire are right in the hunt for promotion, as the Leicestershire, and both either could get promoted stripped of all their assets, which is clearly terrible again for the integrity of the competition. It feels like the numbers probably need to increase. I don't know what 36,000 does for Worcestershire. Perhaps that is an absolute game changer. It doesn't feel like it, does it, if you've lost 4 of your brightest talents? And crucially, where do Worcestershire go to replace those players? So I haven't thought this through particularly clearly, but I would like to see a proper transfer system in place, so that if the big counties do want to come along and take Haynes or Pennington or Tongue, and they want to do it during their contract, then they can do if the two sides agree a fee. So then Worcestershire might be able to get more money, more than the 36,000 they're getting for the compensation, if Surrey or Notts or Warwickshire really want those players at that time. Then that feels like they might get better reward for the work they put into bring these players through. And obviously at that point they would have the ability to say, no, we want to keep hold of our player, and then let the contract run down if that's the way they want to go, but get the full services out of them until that point. Like I say, it's a tricky thing, and you need to make sure the smaller counties are protected, because this does come to the right of the heart of the 18 county model. For the people who don't want 18 counties, there is going to be no stronger argument than they're not competitive. And obviously, if the top counties take all the best players, then you're going to get to that point.
Yeah.
So something needs to be done quickly. Ian Botham was very passionate about this when he took on the Durham chairmanship, and they obviously lost a lot of players in one go, and are only really beginning to build themselves up again now. And then the conversation seemed to quieten down again, and the last couple of weeks at Worcestershire, which must be, imagine being in that change room, how demoralising that would be. It's now kind of bubbled up to the surface again, and definitely needs looking at.
Two other bits of county transfer news. Lewis Deploy, who's got an excellent record in all formats for Derbyshire, he's going to move to Middlesex next season. A really good signing for them, who've had some struggles with the bat in recent years. And then Mo Amir is going to Derbyshire. Initially, it's an overseas, but it's being reported in the Telegraph that he'll qualify as a local player soon. So that's obviously a huge signing for Derbyshire if that happens. Ben, talk us through Harmanpreet Kaur's week.
Yeah, well, I mean, this was extraordinary, really, because you get batters who have tantrums after they get out, and that's kind of accepted. It's rare that you extend it just for so long through the post-match presentation, then through the press conference. So the context is India were playing Bangladesh in an ODI series, and actually,
I almost want to start with this because this is the most important thing. Bangladesh tied the series, which is an amazing result for them. Like, they hadn't even beaten India in a single ODI before last week, and then they, won the first two and then tied the last game. And that's an incredible result. And that's kind of the root of the frustration, really, because if India were cruising through this game, then they wouldn't care about any umpiring decisions. They'd be able to be magnanimous, and Bangladesh should take heart in the fact that they have really riled up India here. But so Harmanpreet was given out leg before. It actually didn't look to me a terrible decision. Like, she might have got a bit of an under edge in a sweep, but even then it might well have gone bat foot slip. So you can't really. I don't think she could have huge frustrations there. But she then turns, smashes the bat down with her stumps, smashes the stumps down with her bat, marches off. There's a few other decisions the Indian team are not particularly happy with, and then she just keeps talking about how much she is frustrated at what the umpires have done the whole game. When they're doing the trophy lift with both teams, it's a tied series. Harmanpreet was reported to have said to the Bangladesh skipper, "Why don't you bring the umpires in as well? They're part of your team." Which is that's a pretty hefty accusation, really. That's not just saying these umpires haven't been great. That's saying these umpires are actively biased. And she has since been banned for 2 matches, which I guess is probably about fair enough. She's had a bit, maybe it should be a bit longer, but also, I mean, this is heat of the moment stuff, I think, overall, I hope.
Has she apologised since?
No, that I'm not sure, actually. So that you'd hope that would come some contrition with it, I guess. Yeah.
I mean, it's such an extreme reaction. You do wonder if there's anything else going on that we just don't know about. And also,
because it also wasn't just her. Mandana was saying similar things in the press conference as well about the quality of the umpiring.
I guess that's the thing, though. There's a big difference between the quality of the umpiring not being up to scratch, but then essentially is insinuating that the umpires are dodgy. I guess.
And also, whatever you think about the umpires, it was very disrespectful towards the Bangladesh side too.
Yeah.
The captain ended up taking her side off, didn't she? Because she was like, I don't want them to be part of this scene. And that's clearly completely unacceptable. So I hope Harmanpreet at least apologises for that aspect of it, even if she thinks the umpiring is shocking.
Elsewhere, we mentioned it the other day as a possibility, but the second India-West Indies test finished as a draw after the rain came to West Indies' aid. India broke a few national records for how quickly they batted in that second innings, but I think that was down to the threat of rain, the looming threat of rain.
It was world records
than anything else.
The fastest ever 3-figure score in Test history. That's what they put on. Yeah.
Interestingly, on India, by the way, they issued a press release in the last week saying that Bumrah, Pant, Rahul and Iyer are all ahead of schedule in their rehabs, which is obviously big with the World Cup really not that far away. It was quite an interesting press release in that you don't normally issue updates on just things are going well.
I like it, though.
Yeah,
we all need good news every now and again, don't we? There's not much of it about these days.
Shimron Hetmeyer has won an ODI recall for the West Indies for the ODI series. It's great to see him back. It's his first ODI call-up in 2 years, but obviously a shame that this didn't happen earlier. He wasn't around for the qualifier that West Indies didn't get through, so obviously won't be at the World Cup. Ben, what is your moment of the week?
My moment of the week is one of the best short leg catch I think I've ever seen from Abdullah Shafiq catching Sadira Samara-Wickrama in the first Sri Lanka-Pakistan test. He's at short leg, and he's not right on the pitch as we've sometimes seen, I guess, Ollie Pope being. But Samara-Wickrama comes down the pitch, and so Shafiq shifts his weight, thinking that if it's going to come anywhere, it's coming that way. The ball ends up actually coming much finer than he expects it, and there's just an extraordinary shift of weight, and then also stretching himself, and then just getting the ball right in his fingertips. It's a brilliant piece of work, and I guess the large story is that Pakistan have been exceptional in this series, which we kind of expected to be a bit of a shootout, a pretty two even match size in these conditions. In Pakistan, okay, the first game was a close one, but they won it convincingly in the end, and they have absolutely dominated the second game. There is a bit of rain around in that game, but
they are so far in front. So Shafiq,
exactly.
He's just reached his double 100 in the Pakistan first innings. They're 302 in front. So even with the rain, there are 2 days left for Pakistan to force a result that will surely go their way.
Yeah, and in the first test, it was Saud Shakil who made a brilliant double 100, put on a really big stand for the ninth wicket, I think, with Nazim Shah, who faced 6 and blocked out loads of balls, and he made a double 100 as well, and had a brilliant start to his test career. So you've actually got new players coming in who are driving Pakistan to what will be a pretty incredible overseas whitewash against a good side. So and they've done it playing. I mean, that they have been the most of any country, I think, in thrall to BazBall, having, I guess, been the most punished by it, I guess, on that tour that England had. And this is, I think, they're more and more getting to grips with it. There have been some sort of dodgy times when they've tried to pay heed to it, when they declared with sort of 10 overs left in the game against New Zealand, setting them like 13 runs and over to win. It's like, this is only going, well, 2 ways here, but it's definitely not going your way. And then a couple other times they've sort of maybe gone a bit too quickly. But this game, they have absolutely got the balance right between sort of the bowling side of it and also the batting quickly when the conditions are in your favour, and then reining it in, and then piling up a big total at a quick rate. So,
but also, if you look at their bowling attack, that's a proper good test bowling attack, which they didn't have for a lot of their home summer. Their bowling attack for this test match is Shaheen Afridi, Naseem Shah, Abrar Ahmed, and Norman Ali. Shaheen and Naseem played 1 test between them on that England tour. They're a completely different outfit with those 2 guys fit and firing at 100%, which is something that England didn't actually face. Anyway, that is everything for today. Thanks for joining us. Cheers, Joe. Cheers, Ben. We'll be back for our first 5th Test daily episode with me and Joe tomorrow evening.
Hi, I'm Kumar Sangakkara, and I'm speaking to you from the Kia Oval. Hello to all parents of young cricket fans. If you are 11 to 16 years old, or if you are a parent of an 11 to 16-year-old, then this message is for you. As part of the partnership between Surrey County Cricket Club and Kia, this amazing opportunity has been created to motivate and excite you, cricket's next generation. This is your chance as a young cricketer to play here on the hallowed green of the Kia Oval, where I spent some great years playing for Surrey in the sport that I love so much. You could be here at a coaching session with me on Saturday, September the 23rd, before playing out there on the field, courtesy of Kia, who have sponsored this club and ground for over a decade. Cricket has been a huge part of my life since I was a little boy, from the age of about 11 or 12, and I know what an opportunity like this would have meant to me. If you want the chance to be part of this, all you need to do is apply, and we might see each other in September.